Too big to breed, marked for slaughter, the Apache Giantess was sold for meat until a cowboy claimed. On a wide, sun-baked ranch in the heart of Arizona, a very unusual cow roamed among the herd. She was not like the others. While most cows were of average size and moved slowly across the fields, this one towered above the rest. Ranch hands often stopped in their tracks to stare, whispering to each other about how enormous she had grown. Her coat was a deep, rich brown, and her eyes, large and gentle, held a quiet intelligence that seemed almost human. People called her the Apache Giantess, not just because of her remarkable size, but because she carried herself with a quiet dignity that demanded attention. From the day she was born, it was clear she was different. The rancher's wife remembered holding her tiny calf, astonished at how strong she already was. Within just a few months, she outgrew all the other calves, her legs thick and powerful, her body long and sturdy. While other calves played and stumbled over one another, she moved with a grace that seemed unusual for one so massive. Some of the ranch hands joked that she might grow taller than a man someday, though no one imagined how true that would turn out to be. Despite her size, she was gentle. She had a soft, curious nature and liked to follow people around the fields as if she wanted to understand them. When a hand reached out to touch her, she would nuzzle gently, careful not to hurt anyone. Children who came to visit the ranch were drawn to her, laughing as she carefully lowered her enormous head to greet them. It was clear to anyone who saw her that she was no ordinary cow. She had personality, a mind of her own, and a quiet intelligence that was rare among animals of her kind. But while her uniqueness brought admiration, it also caused worry. The ranch itself was not a wealthy one. The family who owned it had been struggling for years to keep the ranch running, battling harsh weather, low market prices for beef, and expensive veterinary bills. Every animal on the ranch was expected to pull its weight, either by producing milk, offspring, or meat. The Apache Giantess, because of her size and health concerns, could not fulfill these roles in the usual way. Veterinarians examined her and warned that her enormous frame might make her less able to reproduce. For the ranch, she was becoming a financial burden, a beautiful creature whose very size made her impractical. Ranch hands often argued quietly about what should be done. Some felt it was wrong to consider selling her, let alone sending her to slaughter. Others, tired of worrying about her medical needs and the cost of feeding such a giant animal, argued that she could not be kept forever. Yet no one could deny the strange sense of awe she inspired. When she walked through the pasture, the ground seemed to shake slightly beneath her weight. Birds would lift off the ground as she passed, and even the other cows seemed to give her space, as if recognizing that she was different. The Apache Giantess seemed to sense the tension around her. She would often wander to a quiet corner of the pasture, standing alone under the shade of a lone mesquite tree, watching the horizon. There she appeared contemplative, almost as if she understood the uncertainty of her future. Ranch hands would sometimes approach her there, speaking softly, sharing their worries or just talking to her about their day. And she would listen, nodding her massive head gently, as if acknowledging their concerns. Life on the ranch was not easy. Summers were scorching, and winters could be bitterly cold. Water was scarce in some seasons, and the Apache Giantess required far more than the average cow. Feeding her meant extra trips to the barn, more hay, and more careful planning. Yet she never caused trouble. She was calm even when storms rolled in, standing quietly while thunder cracked and lightning lit up the sky. Other animals panicked, but she remained composed, her presence somehow calming the others. Ranch hands began to call her the Gentle Giant, a name that reflected both her size and her temperament. Despite her challenges, the Apache Giantess had small joys in life. She loved to graze in the early mornings when the sun was low and the air was cool. She seemed to take particular pleasure in rolling in the soft dirt under the shade of the trees, kicking up dust lazily, and then lying down to rest. Children visiting the ranch would sometimes sneak her treats, like sweet apples or carrots, which she accepted delicately with her enormous tongue. She even seemed to enjoy the sound of music. On certain evenings, when the family played soft tunes on an old guitar, she would stand nearby, ears twitching and sway her massive head gently, as if she understood the rhythm. But admiration and affection could not change the harsh reality. The ranch needed to make difficult decisions to survive. The Apache Giantess, for all her charm and gentle ways, was becoming increasingly expensive to care for. Her food alone cost more than several other cows combined. She also required special attention from veterinarians, who were concerned about her joints and the stress on her heart due to her size. The rancher's wife often stayed awake at night worrying, torn between love for this remarkable animal and the practical needs of the family. Ranch hands who had grown attached struggled with the thought of losing her. Some had spent hours talking to her, teaching her tricks like nudging a ball with her nose or following them around the pasture on their morning rounds. They remembered how she had saved a young calf from being trampled by a sudden stampede by gently nudging it out of harm's way. They felt she deserved more than just a life of utility, yet they knew the reality of ranching left little room for sentimentality. Still, the Apache Giantess carried herself with dignity through all of it. She did not panic when new ranch hands arrived or when strangers came to inspect the herd. She did not act aggressively, even when other cows crowded her in the feed lot. She seemed to understand her strength and her size, using it carefully and thoughtfully. Those who observed her began to see her not just as a cow, but as a creature with its own story, a being who had earned her place in the world through resilience and grace. Even the local community had begun to hear of her. Neighbors would stop by to catch a glimpse of the enormous cow that had captured the imagination of everyone who saw her. Some brought gifts, like bundles of hay or vegetables, while others just wanted to admire her from a distance. Children drew pictures of her, and local newspapers occasionally ran small stories about the Apache Giantess, marveling at her size and gentle nature. For a moment, she seemed to be more than an animal. She was a symbol of something extraordinary in an otherwise ordinary world. But beneath all the admiration and fascination, an unspoken question loomed. What would happen to her when the ranch could no longer keep her? Would she remain a symbol of wonder, or would her story end in the harsh reality of being sold for meat, as many of her kind eventually were? Those who cared for her wrestled with the answer daily, hoping for a miracle or some unexpected twist of fate that would allow her to live out her life in peace. And so, each day on the ranch began much the same. The Apache Giantess would rise with the sun, stretch her massive legs, and step into the morning light, grazing calmly as the other cows moved around her. She carried herself with quiet strength, unaware of the storm of decisions and worries swirling around her. To anyone who watched her, she was a living testament to resilience, gentleness, and the quiet majesty of nature. And while the future remained uncertain, the days she spent in the sun-soaked pastures of Arizona were hers to enjoy, filled with simple joys and the admiration of those who truly saw her for what she was, a gentle giant unlike any other. The Apache Giantess had grown even larger with each passing season. Her size, once a wonder to the ranch hands and neighbors, had now become a source of concern for the family that owned the ranch. While she continued to move with gentle grace, the practical challenges of keeping such an enormous animal were becoming impossible to ignore. Each morning, her massive body required more food, more space, and more care than the ranch could comfortably provide. The rancher, a man who had spent his entire life tending cattle, now faced the hardest decision he had ever made: what to do with the gentle giant that had captured the hearts of everyone who met her. Word of the Apache Giantess' size and intelligence had spread beyond the ranch. Local newspapers had written small stories about her, and neighbors often stopped by to see the remarkable cow in person. Children who came to visit would laugh as she carefully lowered her enormous head to greet them, nuzzling their tiny hands without causing harm. Adults marveled at her calm temperament and the way she seemed almost to understand the emotions of those around her. She had become a living legend in the small community, a creature that seemed larger than life in more ways than one. Despite the admiration, the family could no longer ignore the practical realities. Feeding her had become a daily challenge. Each bale of hay, each bucket of grain, had to be carefully calculated to meet her enormous nutritional needs. Watering her was even more difficult, as she could drink as much as 3 or 4 regular cows combined. During the hottest summer days, the family worried constantly, making extra trips to ensure she had enough shade and cool water. Veterinarians had warned that her joints and heart could be under strain from her size, making her care more urgent and costly. The decision weighed heavily on the rancher. He had always treated his animals with respect, seeing them not just as livestock, but as living beings with their own personalities. He remembered how the Apache Giantess had once guided a lost calf back to the herd, using her enormous body to gently shield it from danger. He remembered how she had stood calmly during storms, providing comfort to other frightened animals. Yet now, despite all these qualities, he faced the difficult truth. Keeping her was becoming financially impossible. It was not an easy conversation when the rancher gathered his family and ranch hands to discuss the matter. His wife, who had always been fond of the giant cow, felt tears prick her eyes as she listened. "She's part of this ranch," she said softly. "She's like family. How can we even think of letting her go?" The rancher's eldest son looked down at the ground, silent, while younger ranch hands whispered among themselves. They all knew what had to be done, but none of them wanted to admit it aloud. The decision that finally emerged was to sell the Apache Giantess. Not for breeding, because veterinarians doubted she could produce offspring successfully. Not for petting or shows, because her size made her difficult to handle safely. The only option, they decided, was to sell her for meat. It was a thought that filled everyone with unease. None of them wanted to see her end this way, yet the financial reality left them feeling trapped. The gentle giant who had brought so much joy and wonder to their lives was now being reduced to a commodity. On the morning she was prepared to be transported, the atmosphere on the ranch was heavy with sadness. The Apache Giantess seemed to sense the tension. She walked slowly, her massive hooves sinking slightly into the soft earth of the pasture. When ranch hands approached, she lowered her head and nuzzled them gently, as if to offer reassurance. No one could bring themselves to speak, and tears were common among those who had grown attached to her. Even the youngest children visiting the ranch seemed to understand that something important and difficult was happening. Transporting her to the stockyard was no easy task. A specially reinforced trailer had to be brought in to accommodate her enormous size. Every step was carefully planned. Ranch hands moved cautiously, guiding her into the trailer without startling her. She stepped in calmly, her large eyes reflecting the confusion and sadness she might have felt. The neighbors who had gathered to see her off watched in silence, some wiping their eyes, others holding children close to explain what was happening. The giant cow's gentle demeanor never wavered, even as the reality of her uncertain future became clear. The journey to the stockyard was long and slow. Along the way, she passed through towns and fields, drawing curious glances from anyone who saw her. Some people pulled over to take photos, fascinated by the enormous cow moving so calmly alongside the road. Children waved from car windows, and adults whispered about her size and her gentle nature. Yet despite the attention, no one could change the path she was on. She was a living creature now caught in a world of human necessity, where financial and practical concerns often outweighed admiration and wonder. Upon arrival at the stockyard, the Apache Giantess was met with more eyes and whispers. Stockyard workers were impressed by her sheer size, some measuring and commenting quietly among themselves. Yet they too saw her in terms of practicality, an animal that could not be easily used for breeding, and therefore likely destined for slaughter. The Apache Giantess walked slowly through the pens, taking in the new surroundings with quiet awareness. She was calm, as always, but there was a subtle weight in her posture, as if she knew that she had been separated from the place she had called home. The stockyard was filled with the noise of animals and people, a chaotic environment that contrasted sharply with the peaceful ranch she had left behind. Other cows and livestock pressed close, unfamiliar, and sometimes frightened by her size. Yet she navigated the crowded pens carefully, stepping gently, never pushing or hurting anyone. Workers marveled at her calmness and intelligence, commenting that they had rarely seen an animal so composed in such a busy and stressful environment. She seemed almost to command respect without saying a word, her presence alone influencing the behavior of those around her. As the day progressed, the Apache Giantess was inspected by potential buyers. Some were curious about her size, others about her breed. But when they learned she was unlikely to breed successfully, many lost interest quickly. Conversations about weight, meat yield, and market value filled the air. The gentle giant, so admired for her personality and intelligence, was now being discussed purely in terms of profit and practicality. Ranch hands who had accompanied her were silent, watching with heavy hearts as her value was reduced to numbers on a page. Despite the tension and sadness, small acts of kindness still found their way to her. A young stockyard worker brought her extra hay, speaking to her softly as she munched the sweet grass. A child visiting with their parent offered an apple, which she accepted gently, careful not to crush the small hand. Even in this new environment, her gentle nature drew people toward her. She seemed to sense who approached with care and who treated her as just another animal. Her intelligence and awareness continued to shine, even as her fate hung in the balance. As evening fell, the Apache Giantess settled quietly in her pen. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over her massive form. Workers finished their tasks, leaving her alone for the night, and she lay down gently in the straw, resting her enormous head. There was a sense of calm about her, a quiet dignity that endured despite the chaos and uncertainty around her. Ranch hands who had accompanied her reflected on the journey, realizing how extraordinary she truly was, not just in size, but in spirit. In the days that followed, the Apache Giantess remained in the stockyard, still drawing attention and admiration from visitors. But the threat of being sold for meat loomed over her. Each potential buyer who came and left without interest was a reminder of the precarious situation she faced. The gentle giant, who had once been the pride of her ranch, now stood at the mercy of decisions she could not understand. Her calm demeanor and quiet intelligence made it clear to everyone who observed her that she deserved better, yet the path forward remained uncertain. Through all of this, those who knew her best never stopped hoping. The ranch hands, the family, and even the neighbors who had visited her remembered her gentle nature, her intelligence, and her remarkable presence. They whispered stories of her past deeds, from saving a young calf to comforting frightened animals during storms. These stories were shared with anyone who would listen, keeping alive the sense that she was more than just an animal destined for meat. She was a living reminder of the beauty, resilience, and quiet wisdom that could exist in creatures of all kinds. And so, the Apache Giantess waited. Each day was the same. The soft sound of straw under her hooves, the distant hum of stockyard activity, the occasional visit from curious onlookers. Yet beneath her calm exterior, there was a sense of expectation, a quiet hope that someone somewhere would recognize her for what she truly was, a gentle, intelligent, extraordinary creature worthy of a life beyond utility and profit. Her story, it seemed, was far from over, and the possibility of a miracle lingered in the hearts of those who loved her. The Apache Giantess had been in the stockyard for several days. The buzz of activity around her never ceased, yet she remained calm and composed, her enormous eyes quietly observing everything. She had become a curiosity for workers and visitors alike. Children pressed their faces against the fence to see her. Adults whispered in awe about her size, and even the experienced stockyard staff shook their heads at her presence. Still, no one had come forward who seemed willing to take responsibility for her well-being beyond the basic needs of food and shelter. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the dusty pens, a cowboy rode into the stockyard on his horse. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with weathered hands and a quiet confidence about him. His job had brought him to the area on business unrelated to the stockyard, but something drew his eyes immediately to the Apache Giantess. He stopped in his tracks, shading his eyes against the morning sun. There she was, larger than any cow he had ever seen, standing calmly in her pen, her massive body relaxed but her presence commanding attention. There was something different about her, the cowboy thought. It wasn't just her size, it was the way she carried herself. Her movements were deliberate, graceful, and calm, even in a place filled with chaos. There was intelligence in her eyes, a gentleness that seemed almost human. Many animals had personality, he knew that, but this one, this Apache Giantess, was extraordinary. He dismounted from his horse and approached the pen slowly, careful not to startle her. He spoke softly, almost instinctively, as if introducing himself to an old friend. The Apache Giantess turned her head slightly, watching him with a quiet curiosity. She stepped forward, her massive hooves thudding softly against the dirt, yet her approach was careful and gentle. The cowboy extended his hand, and after a brief moment of hesitation, she nudged it with her nose. The contact was light, delicate, and full of trust. For a moment, the cowboy simply stood there, amazed by the connection that seemed to pass silently between them. This was no ordinary cow, he realized. She had a mind of her own and a soul that resonated with understanding. He spent the morning observing her closely. He watched how she interacted with the other animals, noticing that she was careful not to push or harm them despite her enormous size. He noticed how she reacted to the workers' movements, sometimes retreating slightly but always maintaining calm. He saw how she responded to the children who came with apples and carrots, accepting the offerings gently and nuzzling them carefully. Everything about her indicated intelligence and awareness far beyond what he had expected. The cowboy asked the stockyard workers about her history. They told him she had come from a small ranch in Arizona, where she had been admired for her size and temperament, but ultimately considered unfit for breeding. The ranch had sold her because she was too large to be practical, and her medical needs were too costly for the owners to maintain. He listened carefully, his mind forming plans even as he processed the story. This gentle giant had been through so much, yet she had remained calm and trusting. It was clear to him that she deserved better than to be treated as a commodity. As the day wore on, he began to imagine what it would take to save her. He thought about transporting her safely, feeding her properly, and providing the space she needed to move freely. He knew it would not be easy. Her size made her a challenge to care for, but he also knew that if anyone could do it, he could. There was a determination in his heart that he had never felt before. This cow, this Apache Giantess, was not just another animal. She was a living being with personality, intelligence, and dignity. He could not leave her here to face an uncertain fate. He spoke quietly with the stockyard manager about the possibility of purchasing her. At first, the manager laughed softly, thinking it was a joke. "You, buy her, she's enormous. No one can handle her easily, and you'd be responsible for all her care." But the cowboy's eyes did not waver. He explained that he had experience with large animals and understood what it would take to keep her healthy and safe. He told them he saw her not as a challenge, but as a life worth saving, and that he would take full responsibility for her well-being. The manager hesitated, weighing the situation. He had seen many animals come and go, but there was something different about the cowboy's conviction. Finally, after hours of discussion, paperwork, and careful planning, the deal was made. The Apache Giantess had a new owner, someone who genuinely cared for her, someone who saw her as more than just an animal. The cowboy felt a mixture of relief and excitement. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that saving her life was worth every challenge. Preparing for transport was another challenge. The Apache Giantess could not fit in an ordinary trailer. The cowboy had to arrange for a specially reinforced vehicle, one that could safely carry her weight and size without causing injury or stress. He spent hours planning every detail, consulting with veterinarians and engineers, ensuring that her journey would be as smooth and comfortable as possible. The Apache Giantess, as if sensing the change in her future, remained calm and cooperative throughout the preparations. She seemed to understand that someone had finally come to help her. When the day of transport arrived, a small crowd gathered to see her off. Workers and neighbors had grown attached to the gentle giant, and many had tears in their eyes as they watched her walk into the specially built trailer. The cowboy remained by her side, speaking softly, reassuring her with gentle words. She nudged his hand in return, a silent acknowledgement of trust and understanding. Even in this moment of uncertainty, there was a sense of hope, a feeling that her story was taking a new, better direction. The journey to her new home was slow and careful. The Apache Giantess stood calmly in the trailer, eyes wide and attentive but relaxed. She had traveled before, but never like this, with someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. The cowboy guided the vehicle through winding roads and dusty paths, stopping frequently to ensure she remained comfortable. Along the way, they passed towns and open fields, and people could not help but stop and stare at the massive cow being transported with such care. Her fame had preceded her, but now she was on a path to safety and a new life. Upon arrival at the cowboy's ranch, she was greeted by a vast, open pasture, filled with soft grass, trees for shade, and plenty of space to roam freely. For the first time in days, she could step down from the trailer without stress or fear. She walked slowly, testing the ground with her massive hooves, then paused to graze gently. The cowboy watched her carefully, making sure she felt safe and comfortable in her new surroundings. There was a quiet sense of satisfaction in knowing that she had finally found a place where she could live without fear or threat. Over the next few days, the Apache Giantess began to settle into her new home. She explored the pasture, tested the water trough, and grazed calmly among the trees. The cowboy made sure she had all she needed: fresh water, plenty of food, and a safe environment. He spent hours with her each day, talking, guiding her, and observing her behavior. Slowly, a bond formed between them. She responded to his voice, followed his movements, and seemed to understand his intentions. It was a quiet, mutual understanding built on trust and respect. Neighbors and visitors soon heard of her new home. Many came to see her, and each was amazed by her size and gentle nature. Children laughed and played near her, offering treats and watching in awe as she carefully interacted with them. Adults admired her intelligence and calm demeanor, often commenting that they had never seen such a remarkable animal. The Apache Giantess had become a symbol of hope and resilience, an example of how compassion and care could make a difference in the life of a creature once destined for an uncertain fate. The cowboy reflected on the journey that had brought her here. He remembered the stockyard, the uncertainty, and the sadness of those who had once cared for her but could not keep her. He remembered the trust she had shown him from the first moment he approached her. And he understood more deeply than ever that every life mattered, no matter how big, unusual, or challenging. The Apache Giantess was no longer just a cow. She was a companion, a friend, and a living reminder of the power of empathy and courage. As the sun set over the ranch, the Apache Giantess stood quietly in the pasture, her massive form silhouetted against the warm orange sky. The cowboy approached, speaking softly, and she nudged his hand gently. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of trust, relief, and newfound freedom. For the first time, she was not being judged for her size, her usefulness, or her practicality. She was simply allowed to be herself, a gentle giant, safe and valued, with a future full of possibilities. The Apache Giantess had arrived at her new home, a sprawling ranch with wide open fields, tall trees for shade, and plenty of fresh grass to graze. For the first time in her life, she could move freely without fear of being judged for her size or usefulness. Yet, despite the beauty of her new surroundings, adjusting to a new life was not as simple as stepping into a pasture. Everything was different: the smells, the sounds, the layout of the land. She had to learn what was safe and what could be avoided. The cowboy who had rescued her understood this and stayed close, guiding her gently as she explored her new world. At first, she moved cautiously. Every step was careful, testing the ground beneath her massive hooves. The soft grass felt different from the dry pastures she had known, and the shade under the tall oak trees offered a cool refuge from the midday sun. She sniffed the air constantly, listening to the sounds of birds, insects, and distant animals. Sometimes she paused, staring at the horizon with her large, gentle eyes, as if taking in the freedom she had never experienced before. The cowboy followed her quietly, speaking softly to reassure her and letting her set the pace. Feeding her was a challenge at first. Her enormous size meant she required far more food than a normal cow. The cowboy made sure she had constant access to fresh hay and water, along with special feed recommended by a veterinarian to support her joints and heart. He checked on her several times a day, observing how she walked, grazed, and rested. Despite her size, she moved gracefully, showing no signs of discomfort. Yet he knew that her body had been under stress for many years and that patience and care were necessary to help her thrive in her new environment. The Apache Giantess quickly began to show signs of trust and curiosity. She followed the cowboy around the pasture, sometimes nudging him gently with her massive head, as if asking for attention or guidance. Children from nearby farms came to visit, and she accepted them carefully, nuzzling their hands and allowing them to feed her treats. Her calm demeanor drew admiration from everyone who saw her. Adults marveled at her intelligence and gentle nature, often commenting that she seemed to understand more than an ordinary animal. She was no longer just a curiosity. She was a creature that commanded respect and affection naturally. Even with her trust in the cowboy, she had moments of uncertainty. Loud noises, sudden movements, or unfamiliar visitors could make her pause and observe carefully before acting. On one occasion, a group of people came to the ranch to see her, talking and laughing loudly. She froze, her ears twitching as she assessed the situation. The cowboy approached slowly, speaking softly, and she gradually relaxed, lowering her massive head to nuzzle his hand. It was a reminder that, while she had been rescued, her past experiences had shaped her cautious nature. Patience and gentleness were the only way to help her fully adjust. Her health improved steadily in the weeks that followed. The cowboy monitored her carefully, checking her joints, hooves, and overall condition. He noticed that she moved more comfortably, grazed with greater enjoyment, and even showed playful behavior that he had not seen before. Sometimes she would nudge a large ball or gently bump a smaller cow, testing her strength in ways that were safe and controlled. Other times, she would lie down in the grass, rolling gently in the sunlight, her body relaxed and her mind at ease. For the first time, she was free to live a life without constant stress or threat. The bond between the Apache Giantess and the cowboy grew stronger every day. He spent hours with her, talking, guiding, and caring for her, and she responded with trust and affection. There were quiet moments when she would stand beside him, ears twitching as he worked around the pasture. He often whispered to her about his plans for the ranch, telling her stories of the land, and she listened attentively, nudging his hand occasionally. Their relationship was not just one of caretaker and animal. It was a mutual understanding, built on respect, trust, and care. Visitors who came to the ranch were amazed by her intelligence and behavior. Children were especially fascinated, asking endless questions about her size, habits, and personality. The cowboy explained how she had been rescued and cared for, emphasizing the importance of compassion and understanding for all living creatures. Adults, too, were inspired by her story. Many remarked on how rare it was to see such a large animal that was also gentle, intelligent, and aware of her surroundings. The Apache Giantess became more than just a cow. She became a symbol of hope and empathy, a living reminder that kindness could change lives. Despite her calm and gentle nature, the Apache Giantess had moments of spirited energy. She would sometimes run across the fields, her massive legs carrying her faster than anyone expected. Birds would scatter as she passed, and the ground would tremble lightly under her weight. But even in these moments of energy, she was careful not to harm others. She had learned how to control her strength, balancing her enormous power with her gentle instincts. The cowboy watched with pride, realizing that her behavior reflected not only her nature, but also the careful guidance and trust that had been built between them. Over time, she began to explore more of the ranch on her own. She learned where the softest grass grew, where the water was cleanest, and where the shade offered the most comfort. She developed a routine that included grazing, resting, and interacting with other animals. The cowboy observed this quietly, understanding that part of her adjustment was learning independence while still feeling safe. Each day, she grew more confident, showing curiosity about new parts of the land, and developing small habits that reflected her personality and intelligence. The Apache Giantess also began to show signs of joy. When the sun set and the air cooled, she would roll in the soft grass, kicking up dust lazily, then lie down to rest with a sense of contentment. She would sometimes stretch her massive legs and yawn, a display of complete relaxation. Children visiting the ranch noticed these moments and laughed in delight. The cowboy often joined in, watching her with quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had finally found the peace and care she deserved. Her life, once filled with uncertainty and fear, was now filled with comfort, security, and the simple pleasures of freedom. As weeks turned into months, her presence became an integral part of the ranch. She helped teach visitors about respect for animals, the importance of patience, and the value of kindness. The cowboy shared her story widely, emphasizing how she had once been at risk but was now thriving due to care, understanding, and compassion. Her gentle nature and intelligence continued to amaze everyone who met her, and her fame grew beyond the local community. She was no longer just a curiosity. She was a teacher, a companion, and a symbol of hope. Even the other animals on the ranch seemed to recognize her gentle authority. Smaller cows, calves, and even horses would give her space, following her lead without fear. She guided them through the pastures, occasionally nudging the younger animals to ensure they stayed safe. Her calm demeanor and careful movements made her a stabilizing presence on the ranch. The cowboy often remarked that her intelligence and awareness went far beyond that of an ordinary animal, and watching her interact with the others was both inspiring and humbling. Through all of this, the Apache Giantess never lost her sense of dignity. She carried herself with quiet grace, whether grazing in the fields, interacting with visitors, or resting in the shade. Her enormous size, once seen as a liability, now became a testament to her resilience and strength. She had endured uncertainty, fear, and separation, yet she remained calm, gentle, and trusting. The cowboy knew that her life had been changed forever, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment in seeing her thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, the Apache Giantess stood quietly in the pasture. The cowboy approached, speaking softly, and she nudged his hand gently. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a powerful message: trust, gratitude, and mutual understanding. The gentle giant, once at risk of losing everything, had found safety, care, and a new life filled with comfort and respect. She was no longer defined by her size or utility. She was free to be herself, strong, intelligent, and gentle, a living symbol of resilience and compassion. The Apache Giantess had now fully settled into her new home. The days at the ranch were calm and peaceful, filled with grazing, gentle interactions, and long hours of sunshine. She moved with a quiet dignity across the fields, her massive form a familiar and comforting sight for anyone who visited the ranch. Over time, she had become more than just a remarkable animal. She had become a symbol of hope, kindness, and resilience. People who had once only seen her as an extraordinary curiosity now saw her as a living testament to the power of compassion. The cowboy who had rescued her spent countless hours with her every day. He had grown to understand her moods, her habits, and her small quirks. He knew when she wanted space and when she sought attention. Over time, he realized that his bond with her went far beyond caretaker and animal. It was a relationship built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. When he spoke to her, she seemed to respond not just with her actions but with her awareness, adjusting her movements and behaviors according to his guidance. There was a quiet intelligence in her eyes that spoke volumes, as if she understood not only what he was saying but also the deeper intentions behind it. Visitors to the ranch came from near and far, drawn by stories of the Apache Giantess and her incredible life. Children were particularly fascinated, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched her move gracefully despite her enormous size. Many offered her treats, apples, carrots, or bundles of fresh hay, and she accepted them with care, careful not to hurt anyone. Adults who visited marveled not only at her size but at her calm demeanor and intelligence. She had a way of making everyone feel at ease, teaching them about patience, gentleness, and the rewards of empathy without a single word. The cowboy often shared her story with visitors, recounting the challenges she had faced on her original ranch, the days she spent in the stockyard, and the care that had gone into rescuing her. He emphasized the importance of treating all living beings with kindness, no matter their size, shape, or usefulness. Many who heard the story left with a new understanding of compassion and respect for animals. Some even returned later to volunteer at the ranch, inspired by the Apache Giantess, calm presence, and the cowboy's dedication. Over time, the Apache Giantess began to develop a small routine that reflected her comfort and trust in her new home. She would rise with the sun, stretching her massive legs and walking slowly to the grazing areas. She explored every corner of the ranch, learning where the softest grass grew, where the water was freshest, and where the shade provided the most comfort during hot afternoons. Occasionally, she would visit the other animals on the ranch, guiding smaller cows and calves with gentle nudges and quiet movements. It was clear to anyone observing her that she was not only intelligent but also aware of the needs of others around her. Her health continued to improve steadily. The cowboy carefully monitored her diet and daily activity, ensuring that she remained strong and comfortable. He worked closely with veterinarians, checking her joints, hooves, and heart regularly. It was a careful balance of nutrition, exercise, and rest, all tailored to meet the needs of an animal so extraordinary in size and nature. The Apache Giantess responded positively to this attention, moving more freely, grazing with joy, and even showing signs of playful curiosity, such as nudging a large ball or interacting gently with visitors. One of the most remarkable changes was in her temperament. Though she had always been gentle, the fear and uncertainty that had marked her early life were now completely absent. She moved through her days with confidence and calm, her awareness of the world around her enhanced by the safety and care she had received. The cowboy often watched her as she grazed, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and relief. He knew that her life had been transformed, and that the gentle giant had finally found the peace she deserved. Her presence also had a profound effect on the ranch itself. The other animals seemed to respond to her calm and careful energy, moving more confidently and peacefully in her presence. Smaller cows and calves followed her guidance, learning to navigate the fields and interact with each other safely. Even horses and goats respected her, maintaining a healthy distance while still acknowledging her authority. She had become a stabilizing force on the ranch, teaching by example and presence alone. Over time, the Apache Giantess story spread beyond the local community. Newspapers and online media picked up her tale, highlighting her rescue and the life she now enjoyed. People were inspired by her journey, recognizing the importance of compassion, patience, and understanding in transforming the life of a living creature. Some came from far away just to see her in person, to experience the quiet majesty of a cow that had once been on the brink of an uncertain fate. Each visitor left with a sense of awe and admiration, inspired by the lessons she embodied. The cowboy continued to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. He remembered the stockyard, the uncertainty, and the sadness of those who had once cared for her but could not keep her. He remembered the moment he first approached her, feeling an unexplainable connection, and how that trust had grown into a deep bond over time. He realized that the Apache Giantess had changed him as well as herself. Through caring for her, he had learned patience, empathy, and the quiet strength that comes from forming a true bond with another being. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the pasture, the Apache Giantess stood calmly in the warm light. The cowboy approached, speaking softly, and she nudged his hand gently. It was a small gesture, but it carried profound meaning. It spoke of trust, gratitude, and understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the life they had built together. For the first time in her life, she was not defined by utility or size, but by the strength of her spirit, the gentleness of her heart, and the freedom she now enjoyed. Her legacy extended beyond the ranch. Children who had visited her shared stories with friends and family, teaching them lessons about kindness, patience, and the value of life. Adults discussed her story in community meetings and online forums, praising the cowboy for his dedication and the Apache Giantess for her gentle nature. She became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in difficult circumstances, life could be transformed through care, compassion, and understanding. The cowboy often watched her in quiet moments, reflecting on the journey from her uncertain past to her thriving present. He knew that every day she spent at the ranch was a victory, not just for her, but for the values they both represented. She had survived challenges that would have been insurmountable for most, and she had thrived in an environment built on trust and care. Her story was a testament to resilience, compassion, and the quiet strength that exists in every living being when given the opportunity to flourish. As the seasons passed, the Apache Giantess continued to grow stronger and more confident. She explored new areas of the ranch, interacted safely with new visitors, and developed a gentle routine that brought comfort and joy to all who observed her. Her days were filled with grazing, resting in the shade, exploring the fields, and interacting with the cowboy and other animals. She had become not only a part of the ranch but a central figure in the lives of those who came to see her, inspiring lessons about empathy, patience, and understanding. One day, a group of schoolchildren visited the ranch to learn about animals and conservation. They watched the Apache Giantess with awe, asking countless questions about her size, habits, and history. The cowboy told them her story, emphasizing the importance of treating animals with kindness and respect. The children listened attentively, inspired by the gentle giant who had overcome fear and uncertainty to thrive in a safe, caring environment. Some even wrote letters and drew pictures for her, celebrating her life and her gentle spirit. The Apache Giantess, now fully at home, seemed to understand the admiration and attention she received. She moved calmly among the children, accepting gentle touches and offering small nudges of reassurance. She had become a teacher without words, demonstrating patience, gentleness, and the rewards of trust. The cowboy watched with pride as she interacted with the next generation, knowing that her story would continue to inspire long after her own life was over. As evening fell, the ranch was quiet. The Apache Giantess stood under her favorite tree, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting off her large, brown coat. The cowboy approached, speaking softly, and she nudged his hand gently. It was a quiet moment, filled with unspoken understanding. She had survived hardship, found safety and care, and now lived a life full of peace, comfort, and respect. Her story was complete, yet its impact would last for generations, teaching lessons of empathy, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness.